Chapter 5, External Threats. Alexander's security team arrived at his penthouse before dawn. Victor Chen, his head of security, examined the blackmail messages with a grim expression. The photos were taken by someone inside the gala, Victor confirmed. Professional quality, despite being shot on a phone. Find them, Alexander ordered, his voice tight with controlled anger. No one threatens my family. The word family still felt new on his tongue, yet fiercely right. James Reynolds, Alexander's attorney and oldest friend, studied the phone. The real question is who would benefit from this exposure. This isn't just about money. Alexander paced before the floor-to-ceiling windows. Maxwell Kingston. Both men looked up sharply. Kingston Technologies has been trying to undermine our Westridge merger for months, Alexander explained. This kind of scandal could spook the board. I'll investigate Kingston's connections to anyone at the gala, Victor promised. Alexander's phone rang. It was Olivia. His heart rate quickened as he answered. There's a photographer outside my apartment, she said without preamble, her voice hushed. The boys don't know yet, they're eating breakfast. Stay inside, he instructed. I'm sending security. After arrangements were made, Alexander showered and dressed with uncharacteristic haste. The board meeting could wait, nothing was more important than protecting those 4 boys from becoming tabloid fodder. Olivia opened her door cautiously, relief washing over her face when she saw Alexander instead of another photographer. 2 security personnel had already taken positions nearby. Thank you, she said, stepping back to let him enter. The modest apartment was chaotic in the most vibrant way, toys scattered across the floor, breakfast dishes piled in the sink, and the sound of children's laughter emanating from down the hall. They're in their room, Olivia explained, leading him through the living area. I told them their father was coming. Alexander stiffened. What did they say? Connor had questions. Nathan wanted to show you his robot. Elliot didn't say much, but he's been drawing all morning. And Lucas, she smiled faintly, Lucas has been bouncing off the walls since dawn. They paused outside a bedroom door covered in colorful drawings. Alexander recognized Elliot's talent immediately. I never planned to keep them from you, Olivia said quietly. You should know that. Before he could respond, the door flew open. Lucas stood there, gray eyes wide with excitement. Mom, is he here yet? Then he spotted Alexander. You came. Guys, he's here. The room beyond revealed 2 sets of bunk beds and walls covered with more drawings. The other 3 boys looked up from their activities, Connor building with blocks, Nathan tinkering with what appeared to be a dismantled remote control, and Elliot sketching quietly. Hello, Alexander said, suddenly uncertain how to address 4 children who were both his and strangers. Connor approached first, studying Alexander critically. Are you really staying this time? The directness caught Alexander off guard. I didn't know about you before, but now that I do, yes, I'll be here. Connor seemed to weigh this answer. Mom says you run a big company. I do, Alexander confirmed, but that doesn't mean I can't make time for you. Nathan approached next, holding up a tangle of wires. Can you help me fix this? Mom doesn't know how circuits work. I'd be happy to, Alexander said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. His phone vibrated, a text from James, Kingston spotted at your office building, trying to meet with board members. The external threat was moving fast, but as Elliot silently handed him a drawing of 5 stick figures, clearly the 4 boys and their father, Alexander knew exactly where his priorities lay. The impromptu strategy meeting in Olivia's living room wasn't what Alexander had planned for his Tuesday morning. James sat on a chair draped with superhero capes, Victor stood by the window monitoring the street, and Margaret, Alexander's executive assistant, perched on the sofa, typing furiously on her tablet. Kingston's already met with 2 board members, Margaret reported, brushing a strand of gray hair from her face. He's spinning this as a character issue that could impact investor confidence. Alexander clenched his jaw. He's using my children as leverage. Which is why we need to control the narrative, James advised. A press statement acknowledging your sons, expressing joy at discovering their existence. No, Olivia interrupted, entering from the kitchen with coffee mugs. I won't have my boys turned into a public relations exercise. All eyes turned to her. Alexander noticed the protective fire in her expression, the same determination that had first attracted him years ago. Olivia's right, he said, surprising everyone, including himself. We don't explain ourselves to the public. We protect the boys first. From the hallway came the sound of small running feet and exaggerated zooming noises. Lucas appeared, wearing a cape and goggles, arms outstretched like an airplane. He skidded to a stop when he saw the room full of adults. Who are these people? He asked, pointing at Alexander's team. These are, Alexander hesitated, then realized the simple truth, these are your father's friends. They're helping us with a problem. Lucas considered this, then announced, I'm good at fixing problems. Just ask Mom. Olivia laughed softly. That's debatable, buddy. Lucas sipped away, presumably to inform his brothers of the visitors. Margaret watched him go, her usual stern expression softening. They're remarkable children, she observed. I see why you're protective. The compliment seemed to ease some of Olivia's tension. Thank you. Victor stepped away from the window, lowering his voice. Sir, Vanessa's car just pulled up outside. Alexander swore under his breath. She shouldn't know this address. She might have followed you, Victor suggested. Olivia's expression tightened. I'll handle this. No, Alexander said firmly. This is my mess to clean up. He met Vanessa at the building entrance, blocking her path. Her perfect blonde hair and designer outfit seemed garish against the modest apartment building. You ignored my calls, she accused. I've been busy. With your new family, she spat the words. Alexander, think about what you're doing. For children with a woman you divorced. This will destroy everything we've built. What I'm doing, he replied evenly, is protecting my sons from becoming tabloid headlines. And what exactly have we built, Vanessa? Her eyes narrowed. Our future. Our plans. Your plans, he corrected. I'm beginning to see the difference. You can't seriously be choosing them over me, she hissed. Those children are strangers to you. Alexander felt unexpected clarity wash over him. They're not strangers. They're my blood, and they deserve to know their father. Vanessa's face hardened. This isn't over. As she stormed back to her car, Alexander's phone chimed with a calendar alert, Connor's science presentation, 1 p.m. He'd added it yesterday after Connor mentioned it casually, a small project about planets that clearly mattered to the boy. The board meeting about the Kingston situation was scheduled for the same time. Alexander didn't hesitate. He texted Margaret, reschedule board. Attending son's presentation. Looking up at Olivia's apartment windows, where four little faces might be watching, Alexander finally understood what truly constituted an emergency. Connor's science presentation had been a triumph, at least to Alexander's newly paternal eyes. The boy had constructed a solar system model that spun with the help of a small motor, explaining each planet with surprising detail. Alexander had sat in a tiny chair, recording the entire presentation on his phone, feeling oddly emotional when Connor pointed him out to classmates. That's my dad. Now, 3 days later, Alexander sat in Olivia's kitchen after the boys' bedtime, surrounded by financial documents Margaret had sent over. The files they'd been quietly gathering didn't make sense. This doesn't make sense, Olivia muttered, reviewing statements on her laptop. Before their divorce, she'd worked in financial analysis, skills she was now putting to use examining Alexander's accounts. These recurring transfers are disguised as vendor payments, but they don't match any actual vendors. Alexander leaned closer, their shoulders nearly touching. How did you spot that? The pattern, she explained, pointing to the screen. Every third Tuesday, exactly 3% of whatever your European division earned that week. Small enough to stay under the radar, large enough to add up significantly over time. A sense of betrayal washed over him. Vanessa has been my account co-signer for the last 2 years. Olivia's eyebrows rose. That's quite a commitment. It was convenient, he said defensively, then sighed. Or so I thought. The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Down the hall, they could hear one of the boys, Elliot, based on the location, mumbling in his sleep. How much has she taken? Olivia finally asked. Alexander ran calculations in his head. Potentially millions. And you never noticed? He shook his head, embarrassment warming his neck. I delegated financial reviews. Trusted the wrong people, apparently. Olivia's expression softened. You can't monitor everything personally. I should have monitored her, he muttered. She returned to the screen, typing rapidly. We need to trace where these funds went. Alexander watched her work, struck by how easily they'd fallen into collaboration. 5 days ago, she'd been his ex-wife with whom he hadn't spoken in years. Now, they were huddled in her kitchen, hunting for evidence while their sons slept down the hall. Their sons. The phrase still stunned him. There, Olivia said suddenly, pointing at the screen. Offshore accounts in the Caymans. Classic. Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from James. Kingston meeting with Vanessa tonight, photographed entering her apartment building. He showed Olivia the message. They're working together, she concluded grimly. Your girlfriend and your business rival. Ex-girlfriend, Alexander corrected automatically. The corner of Olivia's mouth twitched. That was quick. Finding out someone's been embezzling from you tends to clarify relationship status, he replied dryly. A small sound from the doorway made them both turn. Elliot stood there in dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed triceratops. I had a bad dream, he said softly. Alexander hesitated, uncertain of protocol, but Olivia motioned him forward. Why don't you take him back to bed? Surprised by her trust, Alexander stood and approached his son. Want to tell me about your dream? Elliot slipped his small hand into Alexander's larger one. There were shadows chasing me. That sounds scary, Alexander said, leading him back to the bedroom. But you know what? Shadows can't hurt you. They're just darkness where light can't reach. Elliot considered this as Alexander tucked him back into bed. Will you stay until I fall asleep? The simple request hit Alexander like a physical force. Of course I will. Sitting beside Elliot's bed, watching the boy's eyes grow heavy, Alexander realized he'd uncovered something far more valuable than evidence of Vanessa's betrayal. He'd found his purpose. Alexander adjusted his tie in the elevator mirror as he ascended to his office. For the first time in years, he'd spent the night on a couch instead of his king-sized bed, Olivia's couch, staying late to compile evidence against Vanessa and waking to 4 excited boys jumping on him at dawn. The memory of their laughter still echoed in his mind as the elevator doors opened to reveal his executive floor. Margaret intercepted him immediately. Vanessa's waiting in your office, she warned in a hushed tone. And she brought her lawyer. Alexander's jaw tightened. Perfect timing. He'd spent the morning with James filing the paperwork to freeze the suspicious accounts and document the unauthorized transfers. The trap was set. Vanessa rose as he entered, immaculate in a designer suit, her smile practiced. Alexander, darling, this silent treatment is childish. The lawyer beside her, a shark named Peterson that Alexander recognized from corporate circles, maintained a neutral expression. Is it childish to investigate embezzlement? Alexander asked calmly, placing his briefcase on the desk. Vanessa's smile faltered. What are you talking about? 3% every third Tuesday, he replied, opening the briefcase to remove a thick folder. Creative, but not creative enough. Peterson leaned forward. Mr. Blackwood, these are serious accusations. They're not accusations, Alexander cut in. They're documented facts. The accounts have been frozen, and the authorities notified. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You're making a mistake. My mistake was trusting you, Alexander responded, maintaining his composure. That, and not recognizing your connection to Maxwell Kingston sooner. Her eyes widened slightly, confirmation enough. How long have you been feeding him information? Alexander pressed. Was that part of your plan from the beginning, or an opportunistic side hustle? Peterson placed a restraining hand on Vanessa's arm as she started to respond. My client has no comment on these allegations. She doesn't need to comment, Alexander said. The evidence speaks for itself. He slid the folder across the desk. This contains everything, the unauthorized transfers, the offshore accounts, the meetings with Kingston. I'm giving you this copy as a professional courtesy. Vanessa flipped through the pages, her facade crumbling with each turn. You can't prove I did this. The digital trail leads directly to your personal devices, Alexander replied. Your passwords, your authorization codes. Her expression hardened. And what about your secret family? How will your shareholders feel about that scandal? My sons are not a scandal, Alexander's voice turned to steel. They're my children, and if you attempt to use them as leverage, I will personally ensure you face the maximum penalties for your crimes. Peterson whispered urgently in Vanessa's ear. She shook him off. You're choosing them over everything we built. There is no we, Vanessa. There never was, Alexander replied, the truth washing over him. You saw me as a stepping stone. I see that now. A knock interrupted them as James entered with 2 security officers. Miss Winters, your building access has been revoked. These gentlemen will escort you out. Peterson gathered his papers. This isn't over, Blackwood. Actually, it is, Alexander replied calmly. The authorities have enough to prosecute, but I'm willing to handle this quietly if Kingston and Miss Winters immediately cease all activities against me or my family. As they were escorted out, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, boys asking if you're coming for dinner. Lucas specifically requesting pizza. The contrast between the toxic atmosphere that had just cleared and the simple warmth of that message made Alexander smile. Tell them I'm on my way, he replied, with pizza. Alexander's phone began ringing at 5:07 a.m. The shrill sound pulled him from a dream about teaching the boys to fish, something he'd never done himself but suddenly wanted to experience. It was Margaret. Turn on your TV, she said without preamble. Channel 8. Still groggy, Alexander fumbled for the remote in his hotel suite. He'd finally invested in a place near Olivia's apartment, a temporary solution until he found something more suitable for family visits. The headline splashed across the screen jolted him fully awake, tech billionaire's secret quadruplets revealed. The morning anchor's voice filled the room. Alexander Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Technologies, reportedly discovered he is father to identical quadruplets. Sources close to the situation claim the children were kept hidden from him for years. His phone buzzed again. It was Olivia. There are reporters outside my building, she said, her voice tight with tension. The boys are scared. Someone's knocking on my door. Alexander was already pulling on clothes. Don't answer it. I'm on my way. By the time his driver navigated through morning traffic, a small media circus had formed outside Olivia's modest apartment building. Cameras swung toward his car as it approached. Sir, perhaps we should reconsider, his driver began. No, Alexander said firmly. My family needs me. The word family no longer felt strange on his tongue. Exiting the vehicle, he ignored the barrage of questions hurled his way. Mr. Blackwood, did you know about the children? Is this why your engagement to Vanessa Winters ended? Will you seek custody of the quadruplets? Security personnel formed a barrier around him as he entered the building. When Olivia opened her apartment door, the relief in her eyes was palpable. Inside, the boys huddled on the sofa in pajamas, watching the commotion on TV with wide eyes. Connor immediately switched it off when Alexander entered. "Hey," Alexander said gently, kneeling before them. "I know this is scary, but it's going to be okay." Elliot, always observant, asked, "Why are those people saying mean things about Mom?" Alexander's chest tightened. "Because sometimes adults get excited about news and forget to be kind." Lucas bounced anxiously. "A lady knocked really loud. She scared me." "No one's going to bother you anymore," Alexander promised, though he wasn't entirely sure how he'd keep that vow. His phone rang. It was James this time. "Board's calling an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the publicity." After assuring Olivia he'd handle the situation, Alexander prepared to face his next battle. Before leaving, he crouched by the sofa again. "I have to go to work for a little while," he explained, "but I'll be back soon, and we'll figure this out together." Nathan adjusted his glasses. "Are you in trouble because of us?" The innocent question broke something open in Alexander's chest. "No," he said firmly. "Never think that. You four are the best thing that's ever happened to me." The boardroom fell silent as Alexander entered. 12 faces turned toward him, expressions ranging from concern to disapproval. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began without preamble, "yes, I recently discovered I have 4 sons. No, I did not know about them until a week ago. Yes, I intend to be fully involved in their lives going forward." Harold Pton, board chairman, cleared his throat. "Alexander, while your personal life is your own business, the company's reputation is strengthened by a CEO who takes responsibility," Alexander finished. "I'm not hiding my children, Harold. I'm proud of them." "These allegations are troubling," Harold began without preamble. "The implication that I've used these children to hide assets is absurd," Alexander finished firmly, "and easily disproven. Our financial statements have been transparent, our tax filings impeccable. This is Kingston attempting to destabilize us before the merger." For 2 hours, Alexander addressed concerns methodically, presenting counter-evidence and reassuring nervous board members. By 9:30, the tension had visibly decreased. "I believe we've covered everything essential," Alexander concluded, checking his watch. "James will handle any remaining questions. I have a prior commitment." Harold frowned. "We haven't discussed the PR strategy or the shareholder call later today." "Both are in capable hands," Alexander replied, standing. "My son's school play begins at 1 o'clock, and I promised I would be there." An uncomfortable silence fell across the table. "Alexander," Harold said carefully, "while we appreciate your newfound family commitment, surely in this crisis—" "In this crisis," Alexander interrupted, "my children need to know they can count on me. Kingston is attacking my family to get to the company. I won't validate his strategy by abandoning them when they're counting on me." As he gathered his documents, his phone chimed with a text from Olivia, "Boys asking if you're still coming. Getting nervous." He showed the message to the board. "Gentlemen, ladies, my entire life I've believed success meant sacrificing everything for business. I was wrong. Real success is keeping your promises to the people who matter most." With that, he walked out, leaving a stunned boardroom behind him. He arrived at the elementary school auditorium with 20 minutes to spare. The relief on 4 identical faces when they spotted him from backstage was worth every disapproving glance from his board. Olivia squeezed his hand as he sat beside her. "You made it." "I promised I would," he replied simply. As the curtain rose on the solar system adventure starring his sons as various planets, Alexander Blackwood felt something he'd rarely experienced in business victories: genuine, uncomplicated happiness. His phone vibrated in his pocket with more urgent messages. He turned it off without looking. The headlines blared across every financial news outlet: Blackwood steps down as CEO. Alexander closed his laptop, shutting out the explosion of speculation and commentary that had followed his announcement. 3 days had passed since Kingston and Vanessa escalated their attacks, leaking fabricated documents suggesting financial impropriety. Though easily disproven, the allegations had created enough market uncertainty to threaten the Westridge merger. Alexander had made his decision after finding Elliot in tears, hiding in his closet with a crumpled newspaper that featured their family photo beneath accusatory headlines. "Is it my fault?" the boy had whispered. "Because you found us?" That moment crystallized everything. No business victory was worth his son believing he was a burden. Now, in the quiet of his home office, Alexander awaited the arrival of the board members. They had requested this emergency meeting after his stunning announcement. Olivia appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Are you sure about this?" "Completely," he replied. "Davidson is more than capable as CEO. I'll remain as chairman, guiding overall strategy without daily operations." "But you built that company from nothing," she said softly. "It's been your life for 15 years. Alexander smiled, the certainty of his decision bringing unexpected peace. "Not my whole life. Not anymore." The doorbell rang, and Olivia squeezed his shoulder before going to answer it. Moments later, Harold Pton and 3 other board members filed into his office, their expressions a mixture of confusion and apprehension. "Alexander," Harold began, "the board feels your decision is premature. These allegations will blow over. Stepping down only appears to validate them." "My decision isn't about the allegations," Alexander replied calmly. "It's about priorities. The company needs stability right now," argued Patricia Chen, head of the audit committee. "Your leadership. The company will have stability under Davidson," Alexander interrupted. "Meanwhile, my family needs me more." He gestured toward the window, where all 4 boys were visible in the backyard, attempting to build what appeared to be a rocket from cardboard boxes under Olivia's supervision. "Those 4 children have spent 5 years without a father," he continued. "I won't miss another day because of boardroom crises or market fluctuations." Harold followed his gaze, his expression softening slightly. "No one questions your commitment to your sons, Alexander, but surely there's a middle ground." "I tried the middle ground," Alexander said firmly. "It doesn't work, not when enemies like Kingston are willing to use my family as leverage." He handed Harold a thick folder. "This contains everything our investigation uncovered about Kingston's collaboration with Vanessa Winters, financial fraud, corporate espionage, attempted blackmail, all documented. Our legal team files charges tomorrow." The board members exchanged shocked glances as they reviewed the evidence. "This is extensive," Patricia murmured. "And exactly why I need to step back," Alexander explained. "Kingston targeted my family because he knew it was my vulnerability. By removing myself from daily operations, I protect both the company and my sons." Through the window, Lucas's wild gesticulation knocked over part of the cardboard creation, causing a minor squabble that Olivia quickly mediated. "I spent 15 years building a company," Alexander said, watching the scene. "Now I need to build something more important, a family." Harold closed the folder, his resistance visibly weakening. "The board will need certain assurances about your continued involvement." "You'll have them," Alexander promised. "I'm not abandoning ship. I'm just changing positions to better defend it." As they worked through the details, Alexander caught Olivia's eye through the window. She gave him a questioning look, and he responded with a subtle nod and smile. For the first time in his career, Alexander Blackwood had walked away from power willingly and found himself feeling more powerful than ever. 6 months had passed since Alexander's world transformed. The beachfront cottage that once served as his isolated retreat now echoed with children's laughter as 4 identical boys raced along the shoreline, their footprints trailing in the wet sand. Alexander sat on the porch, watching them, marveling at how each had grown in such a short time. Connor constructed an elaborate sand fortress, directing his brothers with natural leadership. Nathan experimented with different wave patterns, recording observations in a small notebook. Lucas performed mad acrobatics in the shallow water, while Elliot sketched the entire scene from his perch on a nearby rock. "They're thriving," Olivia said, joining Alexander with 2 cups of coffee. "All of them." He accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks to you. You laid the foundation long before I knew they existed." She shook her head, smiling. "They needed their father. I see pieces of you in each of them every day." The legal battle with Kingston and Vanessa had ended 3 weeks earlier, a complete victory. Kingston's company was now under federal investigation, and Vanessa had agreed to a settlement that included a binding non-disclosure agreement about the children. More importantly, the public fascination with the Blackwood quadruplets had faded as newer scandals captured media attention. "Have you seen today's business news?" Olivia asked, scrolling through her phone. Blackwood Technology stock hit an all-time high under Davidson's leadership. Alexander sipped his coffee. "Good. The company was never meant to be a one-man show." "You don't miss it?" she asked. "Not even a little." He considered the question, watching his sons play. "I miss certain aspects, the challenge, the strategy, but I've found those elsewhere now." He gestured toward the beach. "Raising 4 identical boys with distinctly different personalities requires more strategic thinking than any corporate takeover." Olivia laughed. "True. Speaking of strategy, the Foundation's educational initiative is ready to launch next month. The board approved everything." The Blackwood Family Foundation had become Olivia's passion, growing far beyond Alexander's initial vision. Under her leadership, it now supported single parents, funded education programs, and advocated for family-friendly workplace policies. "You've done extraordinary work," he said, admiration clear in his voice. She smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "It feels good to use my skills for something meaningful." A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The boys gathered their belongings, sensing the approaching dinner time without being told. "Move in with me," Alexander said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. Olivia turned, surprise evident in her expression. "What?" "Not just here for vacation," he clarified. "Permanently. The townhouse, the beach house, wherever we are. I want us to be a real family." She hesitated, searching his face. "Alexander, co-parenting is going well, but this is—" "I know it's sudden," he interrupted, "or maybe it's not sudden at all. Maybe it's been building since the moment I saw you again at that gala." He took her hand, his expression earnest. "When we were married before, I was building an empire. I gave you time and attention only when it was convenient. You deserved better." "We were both young," she said softly. "I didn't know how to compete with your ambition." "You shouldn't have had to compete," he replied. "I understand that now. The boys showed me what really matters." The children approached the porch, their faces glowing with exertion and happiness. Alexander felt his heart expand at the sight. "I'm not asking because of the boys," he continued. "I'm asking because these months with you have reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place, your strength, your compassion, your brilliant mind." Olivia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You've changed. For the better, I hope," he said with a small smile. She glanced at their sons, now racing each other up the beach steps, then back at Alexander. The man before her was indeed transformed, his ambition tempered by wisdom, his drive channeled into fatherhood. "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Let's be a family. A real one." As their sons burst onto the porch, chattering about their adventures, Alexander pulled Olivia close, finally understanding that true success had nothing to do with corporate titles or market shares. It had everything to do with love. "The stock has already dropped 3 points," another member noted. Alexander's response was measured but firm. It will recover when investors see this changes nothing about my leadership capabilities. In fact, he continued, this morning's events have clarified something important. The board members exchanged glances. I'm restructuring my schedule, effective immediately, Alexander announced. I'll be leaving the office by 5 p.m. most days to spend time with my sons. My executive team will handle anything after hours. The shocked silence that followed was exactly what he expected. The press conference wasn't Alexander's idea. It was Connor's. Dad, why don't you just tell everyone the truth, the 5-year-old had suggested over breakfast 3 days after the media explosion. That's what my teacher says to do when people spread rumors. Alexander had nearly choked on his coffee, both at the simple wisdom and at being called Dad so casually for the first time. Now, standing before a wall of cameras in Blackwood Technologies' conference room, that 5-year-old's advice guided him. Olivia sat in the front row, composed but nervous, while the boys remained safely at home with Margaret. Thank you all for coming, Alexander began, adjusting his tie. Rather than respond to speculation, I want to share the facts directly. Camera flashes peppered the room as he continued. 1 week ago, I discovered I am the father of identical quadruplet boys. Their mother, Olivia Blake, and I were previously married. Our divorce was finalized before she learned of her pregnancy. Despite her attempts to inform me, miscommunications prevented me from knowing about my sons until recently. He paused, letting the information settle. I want to be clear, there was no deception, no scandal, just an unfortunate series of circumstances that kept me from knowing my children. Now that I do know them, I intend to be fully present in their lives. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Blackwood, what about the allegations from Vanessa Winters that Ms. Blake deliberately hid the children to extract financial gain later? Alexander's jaw tightened. Those allegations are categorically false and potentially libelous. Ms. Winters is no longer associated with me personally or professionally. Another reporter called out, will this affect your position as CEO? I remain fully committed to Blackwood Technologies, Alexander replied. However, I'm also committed to being a father. Moving forward, I'm implementing changes to ensure I can fulfill both roles effectively. He outlined his restructured schedule, the delegation of certain responsibilities, and his commitment to maintaining the company's trajectory while being present for his sons. In fact, he continued, this experience has inspired a new initiative. Today, I'm announcing the formation of the Blackwood Family Foundation, focused on supporting single parents and children's education. The announcement generated a flutter of interest. Alexander glanced at Olivia, whose surprise was evident. Ms. Blake will serve as the foundation's director, bringing her first-hand experience and financial expertise to the role. The questions shifted from sensational to substantive, details about the foundation, his plans for co-parenting, the company's future. By the time Alexander concluded, the narrative had visibly transformed from scandal to human interest story. As reporters dispersed, Olivia approached him, eyebrows raised. Director of your foundation? That's the first I'm hearing of this. A spur-of-the-moment decision, he admitted, but a good one, I think. You understand both finance and the challenges single parents face. He hesitated. Unless you're not interested. She studied him, searching for ulterior motives. And the salary? Competitive. Very competitive. A small smile tugged at her lips. You realize this looks like you're trying to support me financially without directly giving me money. Is that a problem? He asked, genuinely curious. It would be if it weren't such a good cause, she conceded. I'll consider it. They walked together toward the exit, navigating through departing journalists. You were good up there, Olivia noted, but I was surprised you didn't mention the embezzlement investigation. Strategic omission, Alexander replied. Kingston and Vanessa have gone suspiciously quiet since I presented the evidence. I suspect they're hoping I'll be too distracted by family matters to pursue charges. And are you? She asked. Alexander's phone chimed with a text from Margaret, boys asking when you'll be home for the robot competition. Nathan says his definitely works this time. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Let's just say I've learned to prioritize what actually matters, he answered, showing her the message. And right now, I believe we have a robot competition to judge. The real estate agent beamed as she led Alexander and Olivia through the spacious townhouse. The previous owners completely renovated last year. 4 bedrooms upstairs, perfect for the boys, and a master suite on the main floor. Alexander observed Olivia's expression as she ran her fingers along the kitchen counter. After 2 weeks of house hunting, this was the first property that had sparked genuine interest in her eyes. There's a small backyard, the agent continued, sliding open glass doors. Not huge, but enough space for children to play safely. The yard featured a modest lawn surrounded by flower beds and a covered patio. Alexander immediately envisioned setting up a basketball hoop, maybe a small play structure. It's 3 blocks from the boys' school, Olivia noted, almost to herself. And 15 minutes from my office, Alexander added. The agent wisely stepped away, giving them space to discuss privately. It's beautiful, Olivia admitted, but, Alexander, the price is not an issue, he finished firmly. The boys need space to grow, and, he hesitated, I need a place where they can stay with me. The current arrangement, Alexander visiting their cramped apartment daily and taking the boys out on weekends, wasn't sustainable. He wanted his sons to have a proper place in his life, not just scheduled visits. You could buy them a palace if you wanted, Olivia said quietly. That's not the point. This is a big step. Alexander studied the yard again, imagining 4 identical boys racing around it. Yes, it is, and it's one I'm ready to take. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, not romance, they weren't there yet, but mutual recognition of how dramatically life had changed in just 1 month. I'll take it, Alexander told the agent, who barely contained her excitement. On the drive back to Olivia's apartment, she remained thoughtful. The boys will be thrilled about the yard. What about you? He asked. She sighed. It's generous. Almost too generous. It's not about generosity, Olivia. It's about doing what's right for our sons. He paused at a red light. And maybe what's right for us, too. Before she could respond, his phone rang through the car speakers. Alexander Blackwood, he answered. Sir, it's James. Vanessa's lawyer reached out. They're proposing a settlement. She'll return 70% of the embezzled funds if you drop all investigations. Alexander glanced at Olivia, who raised an eyebrow. Tell them I want 90% and a signed non-disclosure agreement regarding my personal life, Alexander replied. Otherwise, we proceed with criminal charges. After ending the call, he felt Olivia's eyes on him. The old Alexander would have pursued those charges regardless, she observed. You seem different. I am different, he admitted as they pulled up to her building. For identical reasons why. The boys greeted them at the door, chattering simultaneously about their day. Lucas launched himself at Alexander for a hug, while Nathan described his latest science experiment. Connor asked about the house, and Elliot silently handed Alexander a drawing of what appeared to be all of them in a new home. How did you know? Alexander asked, genuinely surprised. Elliot shrugged. I just knew you'd find it today. That evening, after pizza and a movie where all 4 boys eventually fell asleep sprawled across the living room, Alexander helped Olivia gather them for bed, carrying Elliot, who remained limp with sleep in his arms. Alexander felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. I never knew it could be like this, he whispered as he gently laid the boy in his bed. Olivia tucked the blanket around Elliot. Like what? So complete, Alexander answered, watching his son's peaceful face. Like everything before was just preparation for them. In the dim light of the boys' bedroom, with 3 other identical faces sleeping nearby, Alexander Blackwood. Feared CEO, ruthless negotiator, finally understood what success actually meant. Chapter 12, Deeper Understanding. Dad, Lucas put glue in my science project. I did not. Connor's lying. Boys. Alexander's voice cut through the chaos as he knelt between his quarreling sons. 2 weeks in the new townhouse had brought joys and challenges in equal measure. Connor, what happened exactly? Connor pointed accusingly at his brother. I left my solar system model on the desk, and now the planets are stuck in the wrong positions. Lucas crossed his arms defensively. I was just trying to help. Neptune was falling off. Alexander suppressed a smile. 1 month ago, boardroom negotiations had been his biggest challenge, now he was mediating planetary disputes between 5-year-olds. Lucas, we don't touch other people's projects without permission, he explained gently. Connor, I understand you're upset, but accusing your brother without knowing the full story isn't fair. Both boys looked suitably chastened. Alexander checked his watch, nearly time for his video conference. Can you two work together to fix the model? I'll help after my meeting. After extracting reluctant promises of cooperation, Alexander retreated to his home office. Through the open door, he glimpsed Olivia in the kitchen preparing lunch, Elliot quietly drawing at the counter while Nathan explained something animated about robots. This beautiful chaos still stunned him daily. His laptop chimed with an incoming call. Alexander Blackwood, he answered automatically. Mr. Blackwood, came the familiar voice of Mrs. Wilson, the boys' kindergarten teacher. Thank you for making time. I wanted to discuss Elliot's situation. Alexander sat straighter. Is something wrong? Not wrong, exactly, she hedged. Elliot is incredibly talented artistically, but he's becoming more withdrawn. While his brothers engage with classmates, Elliot spends recess alone, drawing. I wondered if something might be troubling him at home. Alexander considered the quiet boy who often watched from the sidelines. He's always been the most reserved of the four. Has he seemed unhappy? Not unhappy, just alone. Children need social connections as much as they need to develop their talents. After the call ended, Alexander sat contemplating the conversation. He'd been focusing on tangible aspects of fatherhood, providing a home, attending school functions, helping with homework, but understanding each son's emotional landscape was proving more complex. That evening, after the other boys were asleep, Alexander found Elliot still awake, sketching by nightlight. Can't sleep? Alexander asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Elliot shook his head, pencil moving in swift, confident strokes across the paper. Mrs. Wilson told me you're the best artist in class, Alexander ventured. A small shrug. I guess. She also said you spend recess alone. The pencil stilled. Elliot looked up, his gray eyes. Mirror images of Alexander's own, serious in the dim light. The other kids are too loud, he finally explained. They don't understand my pictures. Alexander nodded, sensing there was more. Is it hard, he asked carefully, having brothers who are louder than you? Elliot considered this, his small face thoughtful. Sometimes. Everyone always looks at us together, but I'm different inside. He tapped his chest. Mom understands. She says I'm like you. The simple observation caught Alexander off guard. Like me? Elliot nodded. She says you used to be quiet, too. That you watched everything before you talked. Alexander felt a wave of gratitude toward Olivia for seeing this connection when he hadn't. Your mom's right, he admitted. I was the quiet kid, too. Still am, sometimes. Did other kids think you were weird? Elliot asked, vulnerability etched in his features. Some did, Alexander acknowledged, but being observant is actually a superpower. You notice things others miss. He gently took the sketchbook, studying the detailed drawing, a family portrait where each brother's subtle differences were perfectly captured despite their identical faces. "This is extraordinary, Elliot," he said honestly. "You see people as they really are." The boy's smile was small but genuine. "Can we draw together sometimes, just us?" "I'd like that very much," Alexander replied, his throat suddenly tight with emotion. As Elliot finally drifted to sleep, Alexander realized he wasn't just learning to be a father, he was rediscovering parts of himself long forgotten in the pursuit of success. Alexander's phone buzzed relentlessly as he finished tucking the boys into bed. 17 missed calls and 32 text messages waited, all from board members, executives, and legal counsel. The crisis he'd been dreading had finally erupted. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked when he returned downstairs, his expression grave. "Kingston made his move," Alexander explained, showing her the breaking news headline on his tablet, "Blackwood hiding assets through secret family." The article featured photos of their new home, speculations about Alexander's finances, and quotes from an anonymous source, close to the family, suggesting Olivia had manipulated the entire situation for financial gain. "Vanessa," Olivia guessed, her face paling as she read further. Alexander nodded grimly. "The timing strategic, too. Our quarterly earnings report releases tomorrow, and the Westridge merger finalizes next week." His phone buzzed again. It was James, his attorney. "Board's called an emergency meeting, 7 a.m. tomorrow." Olivia set down the tablet. "You should go. They need reassurance." "The boys have their school play tomorrow afternoon," Alexander reminded her. "I promised I'd be there." "This is your company, Alexander. The boys will understand." "Will they?" he interrupted. "Connor already asked twice if I'd really come. Lucas has been practicing his 3 lines non-stop." Elliot designed the backdrop. Nathan built props. The conflict tore at him, the familiar pull of corporate responsibility versus his still new commitment to fatherhood. 2 months ago, the choice would have been automatic. "I need to handle both," he decided, already drafting a plan. "I'll make the early meeting, address the board's concerns, then leave by noon for the play." Olivia looked skeptical. "And if the meeting runs long?" "It won't," Alexander said with determination. "Not this time." The boardroom felt unusually hostile when Alexander entered at 7 a.m. sharp. Expressions ranged from concern to openly accusatory. Millionaire CEO goes to a winter party alone and meets his ex-wife with quadruplets identical to him. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The Grand Windsor Hotel's ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers, a perfect backdrop for Manhattan's elite to display their wealth while pretending to care about charity. Alexander Blackwood adjusted his custom Armani tie, nodding mechanically at another investor's joke. At 42, he'd mastered the art of seeming engaged while his mind worked on more important matters. "Shame Vanessa couldn't join us," remarked Harold Petion, chairman of Alexander's board. "Last-minute headache," Alexander replied, grateful for the excuse he'd crafted to attend alone. Lately, Vanessa's jealous interrogations after every event had become exhausting. A server offered champagne, and Alexander reached for a flute, his eyes drifting across the crowd. That's when he saw her, Olivia. His hand froze midair. 3 years had passed since their divorce, yet he'd recognize her anywhere. She wore a simple navy dress, her copper hair falling in loose waves, a stark contrast to the overdone women surrounding her. But it wasn't Olivia who caused his blood to run cold, it was the 4 small boys clustered around her. For identical faces, for matching sets of intense gray eyes, his eyes. For perfect miniature versions of himself, down to the characteristic Blackwood cleft chin. "Alexander, are you all right?" Harold's voice seemed to come from miles away. The champagne server moved on, forgotten. Alexander couldn't tear his gaze from the impossible scene before him. The boys appeared to be about 5 years old, which aligned perfectly with the timeline of their divorce. "Excuse me," he muttered to Harold, already moving across the ballroom as if pulled by gravity. Olivia looked up, spotting him mid-approach. Her eyes widened, color draining from her face. She whispered something to the boys, who turned in unison to stare at Alexander. The sight of 4 identical pairs of eyes, his eyes, examining him with childlike curiosity made his steps falter. One boy tugged at Olivia's dress. "Mom, who's that man?" Another tilted his head. "He looks like us." Alexander stopped before them, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain everyone could hear it. The ambient chatter of the gala faded to a distant hum. "Olivia," he managed, his voice barely controlled, "I think we need to talk." She straightened her shoulders, placing protective hands on 2 of the boys. "Alexander, I was wondering when this day would come." "Are they?" He couldn't finish the question, though the answer was written in every feature of their small faces. "Yes," she answered simply. "Connor, Nathan, Elliot, and Lucas." The smallest boy, or perhaps just the most shy, partially hid behind Olivia, peeking out with unmistakable curiosity. A flash went off nearby, someone capturing the tense reunion. Alexander barely noticed, his world shrinking to just these 5 people who had suddenly, irrevocably changed everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, torn between anger and an overwhelming need to know these children, his children. Across the room, a commotion near the entrance caught his peripheral vision. Vanessa had arrived, scanning the crowd with sharp eyes. His past and present were about to collide, and nothing would ever be the same. Alexander guided Olivia and the boys to a quiet alcove off the main ballroom, his mind racing. 4 identical faces stared up at him with undisguised curiosity. "Which one is which?" he asked, trying to detect differences between them. Olivia pointed to each boy in turn. "Connor wears blue, he's our leader. Nathan in green is our inventor. Elliot in gray is our artist, and Lucas in red never stops moving." As if on cue, Lucas spun in a circle while Connor stepped protectively closer to his mother. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alexander's voice was low, controlled, but tension vibrated beneath each word. "I tried," Olivia replied, her eyes never leaving the boys. "After our divorce was finalized, I called your office 17 times. Your assistant blocked me. I sent 3 certified letters, they were returned unopened." Alexander's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. I never." "Mom, I'm hungry," interrupted Nathan, tugging at Olivia's dress. "Me too," echoed Lucas, while Elliot simply stared at Alexander with solemn eyes. "Give a moment, please," Alexander said to a passing server. "Could you take these gentlemen to get some of those chocolate desserts I saw earlier?" The server nodded, offering her hand. "Would you boys like to see the chocolate fountain?" Connor looked to his mother for permission. After Olivia's nod, all 4 boys followed the server, though not without backward glances. "You named them all yourself," Alexander said once they were alone. "I didn't have much choice," Olivia replied, bitterness tinging her voice. "The pregnancy was complicated. Quadruplets aren't exactly common." Alexander ran a hand through his dark hair. "I would have helped, you know that." "Do I?" Olivia's eyes flashed. "You made it very clear during our divorce that your empire mattered more than anything else." Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen alongside a text, "Where are you?" "I'm at the entrance." He silenced the phone, but not before Olivia glimpsed the name. "Ah, the girlfriend. Does she know you have 4 children?" "She doesn't because until 5 minutes ago, neither did I," he replied sharply. Olivia's expression softened slightly. "I stopped trying to reach you after the first year. The boys deserved better than a father who didn't want them." "I never said I didn't want them," his voice rose enough that nearby guests glanced over. He lowered it again. "How could I want something I never knew existed?" A small commotion drew their attention. Across the room, the boys had returned, chocolate smeared on 4 identical faces as they pointed excitedly at the ice sculpture. In that moment, Alexander's phone buzzed again, followed by a familiar voice cutting through the crowd. "There you are, darling. Who's this?" Vanessa appeared beside them, elegant in a crimson dress, her smile not reaching her eyes as she assessed Olivia. Simultaneously, Alexander noticed a man discreetly taking photos with his phone. The situation was spiraling beyond his control. "Alexander," Vanessa pressed, her hand gripping his arm possessively. Before he could formulate a response, Connor led his brothers back to their mother. 4 pairs of gray eyes, identical to Alexander's, looked up at Vanessa. "Who's she, Mom?" Connor asked, chocolate still smudging his chin. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails dug into Alexander's arm as comprehension dawned on her face. "What have you done?" she whispered. Alexander stood frozen between 2 worlds, Vanessa's manicured perfection and the messy, chocolate-smeared reality of his sons. 4 identical faces stared up at him, expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. "Alexander," Vanessa's voice carried that dangerous sweetness he'd come to recognize, "who are these children?" Before he could answer, Connor stepped forward. "I'm Connor Blackwood. These are my brothers." Vanessa's smile vanished. "Blackwood?" "Yes," Olivia interjected firmly. "My sons carry their father's name." The blood drained from Vanessa's face. "Their father?" She turned to Alexander. "Is this some kind of joke?" "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Alexander suggested, noticing the growing attention from nearby guests. "No need," Vanessa said icily. "I understand perfectly." She spun on her heel, striding toward the exit. "Vanessa, wait," Alexander began, but Elliot tugged at his sleeve. "Are you really our dad?" the boy asked quietly. The simple question silenced everything in Alexander's mind. He crouched to meet Elliot's eyes, his own eyes reflected back at him. "Yes," he answered, his voice unexpectedly thick. "I believe I am." Elliot studied him solemnly before extending his small hand. "I'm Elliot. I draw pictures." Alexander accepted the handshake, overwhelmed by the tiny fingers gripping his. "I'd like to see your drawings sometime." "They're really good," Lucas interjected, bouncing on his toes. "He drew me riding a dragon yesterday." Nathan pushed his glasses up. "Dragons aren't scientifically accurate, though." "They don't have to be," Connor defended his brother. "It's art." Alexander watched the interaction, fascinated by their distinct personalities despite identical appearances, a family he never knew existed, debating dragons right before his eyes. "I should handle Vanessa," he said to Olivia, reluctantly standing. "You should," she agreed, but hesitated. "Alexander, these boys have lived 5 years without you. Don't make promises you won't keep." The warning stung, but he recognized the protective instinct behind it. "I want to know them," he said firmly. "All of them." Olivia nodded cautiously. "Then we have a lot to discuss." As if on cue, Alexander's phone chimed with an incoming message. He glanced down to see an unknown number had sent an image, a perfectly framed photo of him crouching beside Elliot with the other boys and Olivia nearby. The caption read, "Tech Billionaire's Secret Family." "How much would this story be worth?" "What is it?" Olivia asked, noticing his expression darken. He showed her the screen. "Someone's watching us. This could hit the tabloids by morning." "The boys don't deserve that," she whispered, her hand instinctively reaching to gather them closer. Alexander's protective instincts surged with unexpected force. "No, they don't." He looked at the 4 little boys, his sons, who watched the adults with varying degrees of understanding. "We need to get them out of here." Lucas tugged at his mother's dress. "Mom, is he coming home with us?" The innocent question hung in the air, highlighting the vast complexity of their situation. "Not tonight," Olivia answered gently, then looked up at Alexander. "But maybe he could visit tomorrow." Alexander nodded, already calculating how to rearrange his meetings. "I'll be there." As they exchanged information, he felt the weight of Elliot's solemn gaze. The quiet boy hadn't stopped watching him, as if memorizing a face he'd wondered about his entire young life. The elevator ride to Alexander's penthouse felt endless as Vanessa silently fumed beside him. He'd managed to escort Olivia and the boys to their car, promising to visit tomorrow, before chasing after Vanessa. 5 years, she finally said as the elevator doors opened to his apartment. 5 years you've had secret children. They weren't a secret, Alexander replied, following her inside. They were unknown to me as well. Vanessa laughed bitterly, kicking off her heels. Do you honestly expect me to believe you had no idea? It's the truth. He loosened his tie, exhaustion settling over him. Olivia tried to contact me after our divorce, but somehow those messages never reached me. How convenient. Vanessa poured herself a generous glass of bourbon. And I suppose those children just happen to look exactly like you. Alexander's patience thinned. They're mine, Vanessa. One look at them and it's obvious. Paternity tests exist for a reason, she snapped. That woman could be after your money. That woman, he emphasized coldly, is their mother, and Olivia has never cared about my money. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Oh, is that why you divorced? Alexander turned away, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. How could he explain that he and Olivia had parted because he'd been consumed by expanding his empire, that he'd believed there would be time for family later? Now, later had arrived without warning, bringing 4 small boys who had his eyes and a world of possibilities he'd never considered. Our divorce is irrelevant, he said finally. What matters is that I have 4 sons who need me. Need you? Vanessa set down her glass hard enough to splash liquid onto the marble counter. They've managed 5 years without you. What they need is your money. Stop. His voice cut through the air. I won't listen to this. Then what's your plan? She demanded. Play daddy on weekends? Bring them here. The thought of the boys in this sterile penthouse, touching Vanessa's precious art pieces, disrupting her carefully curated environment, struck him as absurd. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I'm going to be part of their lives. And what about us? Vanessa stepped closer. What about our plans? Alexander realized with sudden clarity that in the hours since seeing those 4 identical faces, he hadn't once considered how this would affect his relationship with Vanessa. I need time to figure this out, he said. Figure what out? Her voice rose. Either I'm your priority, or they are. They're my children, he said firmly. Vanessa stared at him, mascara smudged under one eye. So that's it? 3 years together means nothing. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She grabbed her purse. Call me when you've come to your senses. The door slammed behind her, leaving Alexander alone in his expansive, silent penthouse. He sank onto the sofa, pulling out his phone. 4 nearly identical faces smiled back at him from the screen, a photo he'd quickly taken before they left. His sons. The word still felt foreign. His phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number, more photos available. Shall we discuss terms before I contact the media? Alexander's jaw tightened. Someone was trying to blackmail him with his own children. If they thought he would allow anyone to exploit his newly discovered family, they had severely underestimated Alexander Blackwood.